analyst Asanda Ngoasheng, who joins us via our video link. Asanda, as always, thanks for joining us. I know you've been listening in as well during this briefing. What stands out for you? And perhaps we should begin, shall we begin with the issues around sanctions and Fikile Mbalula's comments that, this is a quote from him, "If we are going to suffer through sanctions, let it be."
Hi, and thank you so much. I think that, the ANC, it's always fascinating to see what happens when they've just had their briefings, because it gives you kind of a taste of how seriously or not seriously they take issues. And I worry sometimes that when it comes to this US tariffs issue, that they may be taking it seriously, but not necessarily thinking through the implications. You're looking at 600 American companies plus, you're looking at hundreds, more than 200,000 jobs that these companies are responsible for, and one of our biggest trade partners. And so when you fail or are unable to kind of sign a trade deal with them, it has implications for our economy. So my concern is not so much that they have accepted that we may not be able to have a deal with the US, because, the US is in the position that it's in, and things may not change quickly. But my concern is more that I'm not hearing enough about what the plan is to mitigate the risk to our economy that not having a deal does. And I'm not hearing what is going to be done with the fact that, this week we've got a 30% tariff that didn't exist yesterday. And what does that mean for South African businesses? And what does the South African government plan to do to support these companies that now have to find 30%? That's where my concern is on that issue.
Yeah, right. Because the people at Luthuli House likely will still be in their jobs despite the 30% coming into effect on the 8th of August. But the Reserve Bank says 100,000 South Africans stand to lose their jobs.
Exactly. So you've got the massive. So it's not just in South Africa, by the way. You've got, Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, Swaziland, which are under SACU, the South African Customs Union, who draw a percentage of GDP based on trade. So whether the US trades with South Africa and with Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and Swaziland or not, has implications for regional stability, because we've already seen that Lesotho has said and declared in state of emergency because of the crisis that's happening with the US and its implications on their textiles industry, which is at the heart of their economy. If there are no jobs in Lesotho and people are going hungry, they're going to be forced to come to South Africa legally or illegally. And that is going to have implications for South Africa and the South African economy. Same for Swaziland, same for Botswana, and same for Namibia. So it's not just a matter of what happens between South Africa and the US that's a concern. It's what happens between South Africa and the US and its implications for South Africa, but also the implications for the rest of the region. Because if you have regional instability, high unemployment, violence, any kind of conflict or anything like that across the region, South Africa gets to be in a tough position. So if you've got a region that is economically unstable due to America, America giving us these tough tariffs, you then have a situation where not only are we insecure economically as a country, but we also are insecure within our region. And these are the things that the ruling party, the governing party of this country, is supposed to be giving us some kind of calm over, instead of actually coming out complaining about the fact that they had Kinsey cool drink and not Coke. Very ironic that one of the things they're complaining about is that they didn't have access to an American company at a time when America is considering basically decimating our economy with its decisions. I just found that so fascinating that nobody actually thought about the perceptions and the frustrations that those very utterances around Coca-Cola would bring to people at a time when we are expecting these people to be solving such critical problems and issues in South Africa.
I want to move on to the issue of Eskom. We know that the electricity minister, Asanda, just this week, I think it was yesterday, visited Kusile Power Station, Unit 4 coming online ahead of schedule, and it puts us in a much better position in terms of energy availability. Fikile Mbalula also claiming that victory for the ANC. It's an interesting narrative, isn't it, in a situation where the ANC itself was implicated in the undoing of Eskom and the corruption there.
I mean, it's always something for a government whose job is to keep the lights on, wants to get credit for finally getting right what they should have gotten right all along. And so this is not something that we should be celebrating. It should be noted, but it's not something that we should be celebrating because they should have never left us in a situation where we were energy vulnerable and unable to have electricity in the first place. There's also the second point, which is that South Africans are crumbling under everything that's going on, and the fact that there are high electricity, the price of electricity in this country is ridiculously high, to a point where just the other day, the city of Cape Town released some communications saying that many residents in the city of Cape Town, which, by the way, claims to have a 95% compliance in terms of people paying. So they're still better off than the rest of the country in terms of the municipal monies that they receive. But they said that most people are struggling to pay their rates and taxes. And so you can only imagine if these guys with a 95% claimed recovery rate are struggling to get people to pay, what the state of the situation in the rest of the country is. And you've got electricity going up, and you've got a country where electricity does not cost the same anywhere you are in South Africa. So some places in South Africa pay more than others. Some places pay less than others, which is something that has never made sense to me because, you know, electricity as a good should actually be equally distributed and should actually cost the same. And it is the very role of an organization like Eskom to then absorb the cost of distribution of electricity. That's why we pay taxes. That's why, you know, we work for this South Africa and pay our taxes and are good citizens in order to be able to have the distribution of something as important as electricity come to us. And you've got a situation where South Africans are now going as far as, you know, burning fires, using firewood to cook, using firewood and risking children being sick, risking burning down their very structures because the cost of electricity is so high.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get to policy and party politics issues, shall we say. The DA, the ANC making a whole range of statements there with the Secretary General saying the DA's posture seeks to undermine South Africa to the interests of foreign powers. Fikile Mbalula also tells us that, yes, significant progress has been made in the government of national unity over the past 12 months, but actually it is not a permanent structure. It is merely an instrument for nation building for now. What do we make of that?
Yeah, I found that quite a curious statement to make because, you know, the ANC has been consistent in telling us that this is a structure that's likely to be in place until 2029. And so that statement by him really left me with a lot of question marks. And I think, you know, we're going to need the ANC to be quite clear with us exactly what they mean by that. But I think it's not surprising that they're making these utterances given the number of times the DA has threatened to pull out, given the number of times that the DA has very publicly contradicted policy statements, decisions, and conversations and ideologies of their very partner, which is the African National Congress. I mean, at times I often feel like the DA forgets that they, you know, actively and voluntarily aligned themselves and partnered fully with the ANC, and now they keep coming to tell us how the ANC is doing this and that wrong, which is, of course, their prerogative. But there are ways and means to do this when you are in a partnership. So for those who are married, they'll know that, you know, people often tell you that marriage problems within the marriage are to be discussed by the two people in the marriage and at the very best the family, but you don't go and publicly engage people about the difficulties before you have tried to solve them internally and engage with them internally. But I mean, on a serious note, one of the interesting things that the DA continues to struggle with is the fact that it's lost its power as the official opposition, and that now belongs to the MK, and it struggles with what this means at a level of its identity as a party. What does it mean for the DA to not be the official opposition, and what does it mean to be a partner to the ANC instead? And you see them, trying to do, I think, sometimes a good job when it comes to, for instance, the situation with the white genocide. They did seem like they were getting it. But when it comes to other issues, they've consistently shown themselves to be having an identity crisis and not knowing if they are in opposition or if they are in collaboration. And you can't have both, unfortunately, within a government of national unity structure. The very job, the very role is to critique, yes, sometimes, but to constructively engage and not be constantly coming out with public statements. But it's going to be interesting to see how and if the DA shifts or changes now that it no longer has the international relations person that recently was no longer there, because that has been one of the biggest contentions within the GNU has been government of South Africa says, Palestine, we recognize Palestine and Israel must stop the genocide, while the DA supports Israel.
Asanda Ngoasheng, thanks for your time this afternoon. A whole range of other issues also to discuss coming out of that press briefing, including the SACP's decision to contest the next local government elections alone. But the ANC says it has far-ranging implications, but those talks will continue with the SACP, its tripartite alliance partner.